back to Sherburne Public Library's Book Talk. This week we're talking about some J books, what we call J books. J stands for juvenile, but these are really, I think, what we would call preteen chapter books, probably in the 8 to 12-year-old category. So we've got 4 books that we've reviewed. These are all new books on our shelves. So Barbara, I think you're going to go first. So if you want to take it away.
So I read Show Me a Sign. Right now it's in our last chance section downstairs, and it's by Anne Claire Lizotte, I think is how you say her name. She's a deaf woman, and she created this awesome book. It's a historical fiction about this girl named Mary in this deaf community, and this deaf community has been deaf for generations. Like almost everyone is deaf, and if you aren't deaf, you sign, you don't speak really, because that's just what the normal is in this community. And this is back like when there were English settlers. There's not really an exact time period, but it's back then. And in classic English settler fashion, they decided that when they found this land, this community that Mary's living in, that they want that land. So they're fighting with this community to like get some of this land or take this land and all that. And obviously there's a communication struggle because these people are deaf and these people aren't. And these people don't have much experience with deaf people because it's not normal for them. So then this scientist comes in, this young scientist, and he wants to know like what caused this generational deafness in this community, and why this is like the normal here. So he makes Mary, the main girl in this book, kind of the center of his experiment, and she gets like poked and prodded and asked all these questions that she doesn't understand because these people don't speak sign language. They don't really make an effort to speak sign language because to them this is weird. These are strange people, and I think it's a really good book, especially for young kids, for deaf kids, and for kids that aren't deaf. It's a really good book, and if you Google it, there's great reviews. It's an extraordinary book with a great lesson.
So that sounds pretty cool, like you said. Yeah, I like the fact that it's all a deaf community. I mean, first of all, it's kind of a cool concept for the book, but it, like you said, it could really bring some, I don't know, I think it would be good for a deaf person to read something like that, to feel like, you know.
I just feel like I've never read a book about a whole community of deaf people, so I think that's just a really great thing to kind of not really bring awareness to, because obviously we all know that it happens, but just kind of highlight, I guess.
Well, and I think that when you say bring awareness, I think it kind of does, in the sense that you get to think about what it's like for people who are deaf. You know, what is their daily routine, and how does that happen? I'm assuming it goes over some of that in the book, Barbara. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I would think that would bring awareness in that sense, just the struggle of everyday life, and the barriers that presents. Of course, in a society where everyone's deaf, it's probably a little different, but
right,
you know, it does bring awareness, I think.
Yeah, I like that the author of the book is deaf herself, because I feel like that really gives her good insight in terms of writing the book. So I feel like that must be a really good example of what life is actually like being deaf. So
yeah, and I think even though it's historical fiction and it's about this whole different time period, I think it ties in a lot with the present, because I mean, still, like, sign language isn't really a universal language. Like, most people don't just know how to have at least basic conversation in sign language. So, and deaf people kind of have to stay in a deaf community or deaf culture, like with deaf family and stuff and friends, or else there's not much they can do. And we have had advancements in technology with the cochlear implant, which can make you like hear electronically, which still isn't the best. But a lot of deaf people don't want that, because there is this whole deaf culture and this pride in being deaf. But it's just, most people don't realize it because it's not a part of like our world. Like
Right.
We don't think about it.
A good one to read. Okay. So I read, or I read most of, In the Role of Brie Hutchins. This is by Nicole Melleby. I'm not sure how, I think that's how you pronounce it. This is about Brie Hutchins. She's in, I would guess, middle school in a Catholic school. She wants to be an actress. That's her big thing. And they have this ritual every May. I'm not Catholic, so excuse me for not being aware of some of the rituals that happen. But it's they celebrate the Mother of God, Mary, and they have a special mass. And one of the kids, they're eighth graders, they get to dress up and they crown Mary with some flowers or something. And I guess that's a big deal. In order to get chosen for that role, you have to write an essay. And she's a mediocre student. She's no, great student, but she really wants to do this because she feels like that will bring in, that will help her gain popularity, and it will help her maybe in the acting thing, help show her parents that she's good enough to get into this acting school or this theater school that she wants to go to. It's very expensive. So, and her parents are, middle-class people who don't make a ton of money. So she's trying to prove something. So she lies to her mother and tells her that she's been chosen, even though she hasn't. And now she's trying to make up for that. So the whole, there's this whole, insecurity of how is she going to deal with that. And then, of course, the other piece of it is her and her mom have a ritual of watching soap operas, because her mom works part-time. So they're home during the day sometimes, and they love soap operas. And they, in fact, each chapter starts with a little description of, a certain soap opera moment, like, this is from The Guiding Light in July of 1984. Reva Shane refuses to let Josh Lewis fling insults at her, and goes on and on. So, but that little piece applies to what's going to happen in that chapter. So it's kind of interesting. But you also find out that she likes girls. She's decided, she's watching some of the soap operas, and she's kind of realizes that she likes a lot of those ladies and young women who are on there. So she's very curious about that. She's only in eighth grade, so it's not a sexual book. There's no sex involved in this, but she definitely is attracted to other women, she's realizing. And of course, she's not told anyone this, and that's a hard cross to bear for a young girl. So her mom catches her at some point looking at some pictures on her computer because she is curious about these women, young girls mostly, her age. So her mom catches her, and then she takes her laptop, and then her mom doesn't speak to her for a while. And I think her mom knows what's going on, but she doesn't want to talk about it. And of course, Brie herself doesn't really want to talk about it. She wants to, but she doesn't want to. There's that whole dilemma of that. And then there's a really smart, intelligent girl popular in school named Kennedy Bishop. And Kennedy is Brie is attracted to her, but Kennedy seems unattainable. Certainly, they're not even friends at this point. But they get thrown together and have to work together. And I think I haven't finished the book, so I don't know the ending, but I kind of think that maybe, something might happen between the two of them. Her dad also works at the school as a janitor. He had lost his other job, and so he's working here, and she's kind of ashamed of that. She doesn't like that, even though, of course, it's nothing to be really ashamed of, but she is. And he helps build sets for her play, and he knows too, I think, what's going on, because he and her mom have talked. So I think the big moment hasn't happened yet. And the other thing is that she's obsessed with watching scenes of, if you watch soap operas, there's many of them have taken on there's the gay character, and that character comes out at some point to their family or their lover or their friends or whatever. And so she's kind of obsessed with watching these particular scenes, of course, because I think she's trying to figure out how is she gonna, come out. So I know, I don't know how it's all going to end, or how it's going to happen, but somehow she's going to get through it. She's in the school play. She didn't get the part she wants, but she is in that, so she feels like that's helping her move forward. So we'll see how it all turns out. But I think it's a good book for anyone who's struggling, trying to figure out, where they're going in life, or what their preferences are. She's a very typical young girl that I would think, who, just is struggling with all the pieces of the world, especially in middle school. There's so much that you don't understand, or you don't know where you fit in. And so I think that's a lot of the book for me. So that was my long rambly discussion of this, In the Role of Brie Hutchins, which I really think is a good book, and it might help out a few kids who are struggling. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, I talked about this before we started filming, but I'll say it again for the audience.
Sure.
This is a really good book for kids that are middle school aged, because when I was in 5th or 6th grade is when I kind of really discovered that I didn't only like boys, and that's really confusing. And there was nothing. There was not like a single piece of like anything. Like if there was something, it wasn't for kids my age. It was for like teenagers and adults that are finding out. And
Right.
I found out like a while ago, and it just wasn't happening. But yeah, and I think it's a really good book to show that, like, because there is this stigma around queerness still, even though it's more like accepted now, that it's a sexual thing, when it isn't at all. Like when you think about your mom and dad being together, you don't think of it as a sexual thing. Like they're just in a loving relationship. But when there are movies and stuff about realizing that you're queer and all that, there's usually some sexual element to it. And that's just not true most of the time. I mean, I found out in like 3rd grade. There was nothing sexual about that one.
Right. Right.
So I think this is a really good book to kind of like destigmatize that and make it a little bit more normalized for queer kids that are younger and they're still trying to figure it out. And I mean, that's all there is to it. And I think that's really nice.
Yeah. I think it really shows an average everyday kid. I mean, if you didn't, take away the fact that she's having those questions, she's got so many other questions going on in her life, which we all went through at that time period in your life. It's just, that's the way it works in life. Your preteen years are crazy.
Yeah. And especially with like adding the religious aspect to it, because that usually is even worse. Especially around here, I feel like a lot of kids would struggle with that, and or a lot of people could sympathize with that. A lot of people have friends or family members that were queer when they were kids and kind of just like had to get out of here because it's not very accepting in a lot of places in the US. So yeah, but this is a really good book, especially for young kids.
Yeah, I think so. So I think Miranda is next. We'll let you take it away.
So I picked out a fantasy book that's called The Lost Wonderland Diaries. It's written by J. Scott Savage. And in the book, the main character's name is Celia, and they've just moved for a new job that her mom has gotten at a library as a head librarian. And she's really nervous about fitting in at her new school. She struggles with dyslexia and she's really embarrassed about it. So she has what they call, I think it's called an IEP at school, where she has to get extra help with reading basically. And she's nervous about making that transition to her new school. She wants to start fresh and she doesn't want to be picked on like she was at her old school. And she's also embarrassed because her mom's so into books and reading, and reading is hard for her, so she doesn't enjoy it. So there's a little bit of like embarrassment there, and she feels a little disconnected from her mom. But when she's at the library during the summer before the school year starts, she meets this boy her age named Tyrus. And he is the exact opposite of her. He loves books, he loves reading, and she catches him taking books off from the return cart and she thinks that he's stealing them. So she chases him around the library. This is how they meet. She's trying to catch him, and come to find out he's actually just reshelving the books because he can't help himself, which was pretty funny. But they end up becoming friends, and they discover while they're in the library this diary that belonged to Lewis Carroll. And the diary is written in like this code. It's not actually like a normal, it's not handwritten with letters. It's like a bunch of numbers and codes and stuff. And Celia, even though she's dyslexic, she's really strong with math and science. So she cracks the code, and when she does it, the diary ends up being a portal into Wonderland, and they get pulled into it. And when they arrive, Wonderland is in chaos, and everyone keeps saying, "You're the ones who are going to save Wonderland." And she says, "No, no, you're making a mistake. It's not me." So they go on this whole adventure together. Don't know how it ends, but I think it's going to be pretty good.
I love that. I love the concept of falling into Wonderland with a diary from Lewis Carroll. I mean, that's pretty cool. And of course, it's a library theme, kind of, the love of books, and they meet in a library. I love that.
Yeah. And I also love seeing books, and it happens a lot with J books, where it's books where the main character doesn't like reading. And I think that's like a really good concept to have in books, because a lot of kids don't like reading. They just like the story, but they just don't want to read. So I think it's really good to have a main character that you can kind of agree with and relate to. And that's really funny. And that's really exciting with the whole like fantasy aspect and getting into this world that we kind of already know. And that's really cool. I like that book.
Yeah, and the fact that she's dyslexic, I mean, that right there, I think some people can relate to that, because sometimes that is the reason people don't want to read, because it's hard for them. And so that makes sense. But yeah, and you're right, Barbara, you're trying to get kids to read books, and yeah, half the time you don't want to read, but that is sometimes if you get the right story, you can get them in there, and then you realize the reading's kind of fun. Excellent. That seems like a great book. So Justine, I think you're up.
I picked this book. It's called Before the Ever After by Jacqueline Woodson. And it is about this boy named ZJ, whose father is a professional football player. So everyone in the neighborhood, they love him. They want to come over to his house all the time. They go places in public and people are pointing and staring, and they're like, "Oh, that's the famous football player." So that's kind of a big part of who ZJ is as a person. And he's not mad about it. He like idolizes his dad. He really looks up to his dad. But things kind of start going downhill when his dad comes back from a football game with another concussion, but this time it is worse than all the previous ones have been because he starts having severe memory loss, mood swings, dizziness, blurred vision, and they go to multiple doctors. They don't know what's wrong. They're thinking it's dementia. They're just thinking it's a prolonged concussion. They basically don't really have any answers. And it makes it really difficult for ZJ, especially one night when all of his friends are over at his house and his father comes into the room and starts asking, who are these little boys? And at first they think that he's joking because obviously ZJ's father has known ZJ's friends forever. But then when his father thinks they're picking on him, he gets super angry and he starts screaming and he slams the door and he runs out into the street and the cops have to bring him back. So that night was pretty embarrassing for ZJ, and that's kind of when he realized that there was something seriously wrong happening. So as the time goes on, they go to more and more doctors, things kind of get a little bit better, and ZJ really has to rely on his friend group and also his songwriting because he plays the guitar, he sings, he writes songs, so he kind of uses those things to escape from all of his dad's medical problems. And then one day his dad walks in on him writing a song and singing it, and he is just shocked. He can't believe his son has this talent, and they start singing songs together and writing songs together, and it kind of brings back a little bit of ZJ's old dad because sometimes his memory is sparked when he hears a song from an artist he liked, or when he hears a certain word, it makes him think of a specific memory. So they start writing songs together, and in the end, everything's not perfect because there's still confusion with his condition and he has to take lots of drugs and they have to go to the doctor all the time. But things are a little bit better because they kind of connected through ZJ's songwriting.
Wow, that's a beautiful story.
Yeah.
Wow. I got to think about what I got to say about that. You got something, Barbara?
I was gonna say, we see like a lot of books that are like this heartwarming, like sports stories that end like with the coach and the team get the victory and stuff. But I think it's really cool that there's like this sports aspect to it, and then it kind of hits like on the realer side of life, which I think is really good to have in J books, especially because it's like it's all too real. And you said at the end where it's like, oh, it's still not perfect, and I think that's the way that it always is. It's not ever going to be perfect, but there's always going to be progress, and I think that's really nice to see in a book and have the like sports element and a music element and a nice heartwarming element. It's just like that book is just so much nice, just put into a little basket.
But I also like the fact that it talks about the brain injury thing in relation to football, because that's a huge thing right now that's happening to people, and they really are discovering how much that's happened to people and could happen to some of our young people who are playing that sport. It's kind of dangerous sometimes to run around and smash your head into somebody else's. But I think that, yeah, right. Who would have thought? But I think that is good because that will bring awareness to that too. And it helps, it kind of shows, like you said, the realer side of that, where it really affects the whole family and how it affects this young boy. And I love the fact that the music is what brings him back, or, his memory, or his, his real dad, And I know that music can do that. That's helped a lot of people with dementia. Music sometimes is the thing that they remember that. They remember all the whole song. They can either play it or they can sing it because it's in there. It just doesn't always come out the way they want it to. So beautiful book. We got some good books.
I forgot to mention this part, but it's written in kind of a poetic style.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
But I just like the format. It just makes it, I think, more interesting because you kind of feel like he's actually telling the story instead of just reading it like there's a regular book with dialogue.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't know. I just like that.
Yeah. I've noticed that in a lot of books recently. It just, it brings a different tone and feeling to it. So, yeah.
Yeah. It really does feel more personal in that style, I think. I really like books in that style.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, again, we have tons of great books at our library. We just, every week we're bringing out cool ones. So that's it for our book talk this week. We encourage you all, of course, to come in and read. And hey, you know, just because you're not in middle school, maybe you still want to read books that are from the J chapter book category. Because I mean, we're not in middle school and we all enjoy these books. So you just, sometimes I think we pigeonhole by putting those labels on them. So, but come on in and check them out. And we will see you next week. What's next week?
I think it might be young adult, but I'm not positive.
I think you're right. I think it's young adult. Anyway, we'll be back though with another edition or version or episode of Sherburne Public Library Book Talk. So thanks for listening. We'll see you all next week. Bye.